Okay. So one of the, beforehand, I have to give you credit. Andrew actually swam in the sea yesterday, which is amazing.
I'm not sure if that's credit or stupidity.
Yeah, that's incredible. So you're not scared of anything.
I'm scared of this.
So we were talking in the, don't be. We were talking in the town hall, and you were our most valuable participant in it. Thank you. And one of the questions that I had was, what is the extent of the ad fraud problem? Is it a sort of manageable thing, or is it something that is a real existential threat to the system?
I'd say it's a mixture of both, because ad fraud's been around forever, as long as the internet, which is obviously forever. And even back in search, it was around all the mythical Indian click farms that are around there. There's always been someone around to try and game the system. So it is manageable, because you invest in it, you invest in resources, in human resources and technical resources to manage it. There will always be someone who's finding a new way to get around the stuff you put in place. So that threat will always be there, but as long as you sort of invest properly in terms of time and energy in managing it, then yeah, then it's resolved.
So I guess the big question is programmatic to blame for this?
Oh, we're going down that route. No, yeah, so no, of course not.
Well, I mean, there's so much complexity in the system, right? And so I would guess that the fraudsters sort of look at the complexity of the system and see a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, so I think anything that is new, not necessarily understood by the greater population, and then particularly that accelerates processes, and particularly as it kind of ramps up into general use, is an opportunity for people who want to game the system. So programmatic's in that space now, where it is ramping up. There's the use of it, and the volume that goes through programmatic is increasing almost on a daily basis. And if the right checks and balances aren't in place to be able to prevent either fraudulent advertising or fraudulent traffic, then people are going to take advantage of that.
So obviously, everyone sort of is touched by ad fraud. From OpenX's perspective, but you guys had to make a tough decision. Like you were talking yesterday that it requires some difficult conversations. Yes, on all sides. So we've got, as I was saying yesterday, we've got kind of an open source legacy, as well. We started completely open source, and so the traffic quality shadow that goes with that has kind of hung around with us. So a couple of years ago, we decided to do something about it. And we hired a VP of marketplace quality who kind of looked at this system and said, right, 30% of your traffic is appalling. So how did that go over?
That was uncomfortable. You have to take it up to the board to say, look, we've got all this stuff. We need to move from where we are today to where we're going in the future. And we need to be really like an underpinning the quality of the sector.
And we should say, I mean, OpenX, its DNA sort of is an interesting part of this, right? I mean, because it was open source.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So you're coming from this open source background and now trying to sell software solutions and actually say, okay, well, if you're actually going to charge people for this product, then we need to make damn sure that this product is high quality and is as pure as possible. So kind of John Murphy, who's our VP of market quality, did the analysis, and it was our executive suite's job to actually take it to the board and say, we're just going to have to chop out about 30% of our inventory, and then the revenue that goes with that. So
is that 30% of the inventory or 30% of the publishers?
It was 30% of the inventory.
Okay, but so what percentage of publishers did you have to whack?
Of actual publishers, I mean, it's way smaller. The harder conversations were actually going to tier one premium publishers and telling them that a percentage of their traffic was bad.
Why is that? So explain to me why a sort of quote unquote premium publisher has bad traffic.
There's actually a guy from GeoEdge a couple of days ago, or the day before yesterday, who nailed it quite well, in that the premium publisher is going to have premium users, and it's going to have large quantities of premium users. So they are probably a little bit more open for opportunists to come in and try and target their users. with the fraudulent advertising. So it is a combination of an increased likelihood of those people being there, and then just the sheer volume that goes through premium publisher sites. Mm-hmm. So being able to kind of go to a publisher and tell them, look, your site is high quality, but this subsection of your traffic that is coming through is not. This is what we propose to do about it.
Mm-hmm. Is this ultimately a marketer problem?
I think no, it's not. It's a shared problem. As the whole sector evolves, both the marketers are going to have to be adapt to how they actually pay for traffic and what they want. You see different models. You see, I really like the cost per hour model that we saw this morning, and then there's engagement models that are similar to that. And I think as we both evolve, both the quality of the traffic that goes through and the quality of the advertising that we can guarantee, then those models need to change, and that will have an impact on fraudulent traffic.
I guess when I say is it a marketer problem, I just wonder whether it is benign or otherwise neglect, in that they could easily sort of suss out the fraud if they were using the tools available to them, but they're just not. Or whether it's a systemic failure of the Merck, I believe that Tim called it.
Yes, yeah. So there's both, I think both Tim and Tom actually referred to this, is that we've kind of let this happen, as the volumes multiply and the traffic just comes there. There are other problems to fix, and this is one of the harder problems to fix and needs a lot of attention to detail. And actually just making sure that your site is delivering the content on time and in the format you want it is a really hard job in itself. Then doing the basic stuff is difficult.
So if you're a tier 1 publisher who is not knowingly doing any sort of sketchy stuff, what are the 3 things that this publisher has to do in order to make sure that they're on the right side of this issue?
They need to make sure that their vendors are putting in the right efforts, both from a technology background and from a human background, to make sure that everything that is going through their site and going via those vendors is quality and is assessed. They also need to keep a close eye on where their users are coming from, and to try and actually kind of spot that before it comes onto their site. So you need to get a kind of proactive solution that will prevent transactions or prevent page views from happening if they can pre-identify those. And they need to make sure that they can do this at scale and put it in as a base measure for every new kind of development. So the Financial Times presentation this morning really was very good on that point, where you've got to invest both in the platform and in the content that goes with it at the same time. You can't just do one or the other, but you've got to scale that as you go along.
Yeah, and I guess it's also sort of difficult conversations too if you need to admit that a large percentage of your page views are not real.
Yes.
That's kind of difficult to admit.
It is difficult.
You mentioned the time-based model. Is that, if things do move in that direction, and I'm sure it will, but CPMs and clicks are here to stay, will that help with ad fraud? Or, I mean, bots, I would guess, would be pretty good at gaming that too.
I think anything that we develop, someone will find out a way to game it. I mean, there's people who, they either do it for fun or they do it for profit. There are people who just, their role in life is to game the system. So, and it's up to us to keep evolving and to keep changing and to keep managing that, so that we are a step ahead of them all the time. About
a year ago, we set up a fraudulent site, and we hired a bot to see how we could do. I read about that. And we didn't get in your network, so congratulations. Got us. Yeah, we didn't get in, but we got into a couple others. Can you name them? Just it's in the story.
This session is called The Americans Are Coming. There's one American on stage, 2 Brits, so it's clearly not complete
I'm
yet.
like half American.
So before I go into it, there's a theme to this place that we're at. I'm a big fan of Grace Kelly, and I don't know if any of you had a chance to go up to the Corniche and see the corner. and The View. Do so this afternoon if you get a chance. But 1955, To Catch a Thief was released with Cary Grant. And if you're female and you remember what Cary Grant was like, it's a pretty swoony movie. Grace Kelly plays an American, and much like her real life, it turned out to be pretty cool on the Riviera for many years. There's a quote in the film which says, if you really want to see fireworks, it's better with the lights out. So that's my theme for the day, fireworks. Mm-hmm. So we're going to start with an introduction to Politico and Business Insider, two well-known brands now, but probably 3 years ago we didn't know much about them. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give a very quick description of what their business is doing and why they feel landing in the European shores is a good thing. Could I start with you?
Yeah,
Julian?
Absolutely. So anyone who doesn't know Business Insider, what are you doing? Go and have a look. We launched in the UK about 3 months ago, have had a huge successful rise from a classic startup story in New York with the founders of DoubleClick, Kevin Ryan and Dwight Merriman, and Henry Blodgett, who's our CEO and founder. And they started blogging around tech stock in New York under the guise of Silicon Alley Insider, and very quickly took the approach that digital was a different medium and that there was a potential audience who wanted a different experience in that. So it grew very quickly and transformed into Business Insider, and we expanded what we talked about beyond the VC money in New York and Silicon Alley, and the growth has been phenomenal. And you've probably seen we just took 25 million in funding from Axel Springer and some of our initial investors, and have a big plan to expand globally across Europe as a natural growth area for us. And we already see so many users from around the world, and I'm sure many publishers do, accessing our content because we operate a very open policy on that. So it's a natural expansion for us to catch up with the growth in audience.
Profitable?
Actually, yes. And I think look, that investment is coming, and everyone is talking about, overvaluation of publishing businesses. But I think it's happening because the new model of publishing is showing that it can be profitable. And we will be profitable in the second half of last year. And our revenues are growing at a faster rate for the first time than our audience growth. And so that's super encouraging for obviously the VC market, but also for us and the potential that business has to grow.
Okay, thank you. Quick intro.
Yeah, so for those who are less familiar with Politico, Politico was founded in 2007 by two journalists from the Washington Post who saw a need, like Henry and the Business Insider folks, to provide powerful journalism, specialized journalism, to a powerful audience. And so we quickly became a must-read in Washington for politics and policy stakeholders. And what we try to do best is, how do we dominate politics and policy like ESPN dominates sports? And our audience, how we really think about it is it's more of an inside-out theory. We think about how do we reach the 5 most important people, originally in the halls of power in Washington, in the White House, in Congress, and in government agencies, and in the lobbying community. And how do we basically attract a broader audience from that? So we started being 100% advertising dependent. We publish a daily newspaper in Washington. We have an online website. We quickly expanded to become about 40% subscription-based with our premium subscription plan, which is called Politico Pro. We reached 2/3 of the Fortune 100. We have about 1,500 corporate subscribers right now. We're about 50% advertising, and then we're rapidly growing our events business. In the past 3 years, with infused capital from the Albritton family, who owned Politico and founded Politico, Robert Albritton, the publisher, said, how do you expand products? How do you expand markets? In 2013, we bought Capital New York and relaunched it to really focus on the politics and policy coverage in the New York market. And in 2013, we partnered with, or Axel Springer came knocking on our door. And so we really figured out how do we, like Grace Kelly, how do we partner well and how do we adapt to a new market? And how do we come into Europe really kind of thoughtfully and methodically.
Profitable?
Yes, profitable and profitable in the US completely. Our revenue grew 25% in 2014, and part of my role is really to make it profitable in other markets and in Europe.
Okay, thank you. Grace Kelly did have the ultimate partnership model.
Right, and I think we do too.
Family.
Yeah.
In my dreams, perhaps. So the reason I asked about profitability, because I think it's important when we get into the conversation about content from these organizations. We haven't really spent any time over the last couple of days talking about content specifically. How are you investing in content, and how different is it in Europe as opposed to America in terms of the kind of content outputs? So both how are you investing in it? Are you hiring journalists, hopefully? And how is it different?
Shall I take it? We're heavily investing in it. I mean, we're a content business, and so to not invest in that side, I think, you know, there's a different approach to how we do content than a traditional, or even this new category of traditional digital business. And I mean, in the UK office, we launched in November. We now have a small team, but a growing team.
How many is a small team?
We're about 16 right now from there, and about 65% of that is journalists. So, you know, it's very much a content model that has scale in terms of resource. And what we've found on content is, and to answer the question around Europe, you know, we'll see, but we're seeing a huge amount of users coming from other markets that, you know, we're very judgmental as publishers, right? It's our job, right? We kind of like to say, well, this is this and this is this, and we often take the view without digging deep into actually audience data. And I think, you know, we took the approach in Europe, and certainly in the UK, that we know that actually these users want some of that content that is deemed US content. So last week, or this week even, our biggest page view story in the UK is going to be the Super Bowl ads. Right? We do a lot of stuff around advertising. And so, you know, as we dig in as a data journalist type business, we see those trends, and we could just cut that off and say, naturally, oh, well, people in the UK don't care about what's going on. Of course people in the UK care about what's going on in finance and in tech and in general news in other parts of the world, probably more so than many other regions. The
16 journalists.
Yes.
I'm thinking, the last job I had was at Thomson Reuters. We had 3,500 journalists there. Steve, I don't know whether you've still got 3,500, whether you've got rid of some of them, but anyway, 3,500 journalists. The FT, I've no idea what their numbers is, but it's certainly more than 16. How are you going to compete with the likes of Thomson Reuters, the FT, Wall Street Journal, with 16 people?
It's a speed and agility model, and it's a model that's built for social and mobile. So, you know, when we look, and that's 16 in London, you know, we have over 100 overall globally. So, you know, and interestingly enough, the Charles from Forbes was saying, you know, 1,500 journalists and 1,500 contributors.
He only pays them when they read the articles, though.
1,600 journalists. So, you know, we have a model that is based on a very different type of journalist. And as we've kind of started to build out that business, we've found it's very difficult. The disciplines are different, right? So it's very difficult to take somebody who's for 30 years been writing 2,500 word articles, opinion pieces, and a certain type of journalism, and say, cut that down to the most important 100 words, and then play around with that piece of content as you see the data telling you what's happening in terms of social and audience. and change your headline and write 100 words of copy, but where's the visuals? And how do we make this more appealing to a social mobile environment? And that's a really difficult change for somebody who's been used to writing very different pieces. So I think it's not that we're not investing in content and journalism, we're just investing in a very different type of content and journalism.
You hear that as well?
Yeah,
I worried it was just my head.
I wonder if I said something wrong. It's just setting off the alarm.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Politico, similar kind of question. So
Right.
I'm concerned about the bells. I'm concerned about authenticity
Right.
from a journalistic point of view, because you hold up the FT, the credibility of the FT, the brand values, its trust.
Right.
So their article, share price goes up by 15% of company X. I know that's right. They've actually bought the content from Thomson Reuters and reskinned it, but that's another story. How are you credible in this marketplace where this room knows about you because these are the digital pioneers and the thought leaders of the industry, but you've got to spend some money marketing to build that authenticity and brand, haven't you?
Yeah, so when we think about content, we do two things. One, 8 years old, we have the same principle. How do we hire the best and brightest reporters who cover politics and policy in each market? And we want people, we try to hire people who not only understand our model, which is how do you target, how do you write, and how do you become must-reads and must-haves for an influential audience. So you're not writing for a mass audience. You're really writing for the insiders. And then also, how do you write kind of fun, fast, and fresh journalism? We don't have traditional, and we're not tied down to legacy standards like The Economist or the FT or the New York Times in terms of house style. We provide kind of a more punchy style of journalism. And in each market, once we hire these people, it's with overwhelming force. We want to be the dominant press corps, and we want to build the dominant staff for each market. So in DC, we have the largest White House press pool compared to any other news publication. In Europe, we're building the largest politics and policy team in Europe, and that compares in terms of the stacks of the FT and International New York Times, Wall Street Journal, even Reuters, who are specifically covering politics and policy. In terms of how we introduce ourselves to this market, it really is, we have to introduce our brand and gain credibility. I think we can't rest on our laurels in Washington. A lot of people, we're fortunate in that our brand has extended to Europe. Our audience, in terms of advertisers and subscribers, they do extend across the Atlantic, but it really is how do we hire the best team to really introduce our brand to new influential readers.
Thank you. We'll get on about your time in Patagonia. Mm-hmm. That's a good story. We'll get to that at the end. Remind me. Competition. Who are your competitors? We've mentioned a few there, but there must be some others that are out there. So I guess, who are your competitors and who worries you in the marketplace that you operate in from a Business Insider point of view?
Such a loaded question.
A loaded question.
Well, it's just that classic, for us, and Henry Blodgett, the CEO, goes on about this all the time, about the internet being the publication. And so, we are working with a lot of what you might deem competitors, and, we run tons of FT content on the site. We run a lot of Guardian content on the site. And we're really trying to inform the readership and the audience. So it's really hard to put your finger on what is really a competitor, because we feel like we're doing something quite different in how we approach style and tone. So obviously, we're competitors on some levels with all those companies. We're competitors with, a lot of the new digital publishers that we've also heard from over the course of the last couple of days. So I think, the competitive landscape is dramatically different for publishing than it used to be, where you could easily put yourself in a box and say, I'm this, and that's how advertisers would view you. And that's changed as platforms have enabled what's really exciting for publishers, which is actually now I can reach a much wider audience with my content because of the distribution channels. So, Facebook and social have opened that up. And so we're all in in one way competitors, but we're also viewing that, what we do in tone and style is very different.
Okay, we did have a little very quick rehearsal last week on this panel, and I asked each of the panelists to send me a note with something interesting about them so I could attempt to suggest that they were human rather than just digital characters. And Gabe was the only one who replied.
You didn't reply?
And
No?
he said that he'd been to Patagonia and lived there barefoot and built a village and everything.
Yeah, I dropped out of school for a little while and just decided to go to Patagonia, worked on a remote cattle ranch, and then went back to Northwestern. So,
I just think it's amazing that you're now at Politico, leading the charge into Europe, and you've had those sort of experiences.
Right.
I would have thought you would have had a full-on either digital or political or lobbying experience without doing
no,
something.
not at all. I actually tried to lobby the corporate guys at Politico to do Politico Patagonia, but they weren't convinced that the gauchos were an influential audience. So, so that was a failure for me. In terms of my experiences, how do you just diversify your own experiences and get as much exposure and try to connect the dots and, I don't know, have fun and challenge yourself.
I agree.
Yeah.
And Julian?
An interesting story.
Well, I'm being flippant, but I'm trying to say that you're both leading some very important new entrants to the marketplace, and as an individual, without asking you what keeps you awake at night and all that sort of stuff, a bit about you as to why that's a challenge and what you've done to be so enthusiastic and excited about, maybe not 11 o'clock on the last day, generally.
Well, it's not an interesting story, but I've worked I'm a big believer in globalization and have worked in digital for 15, 16 years, most of my career. About half of that career has been in the US, so I sort of probably have a slight transatlantic twang. But I think for me, that is driving the generational shifts in what's happening in this industry, and it's opening up new opportunities for what used to be a very closed industry to different backgrounds and subsets. So who we're hiring as journalists, who we're hiring in advertising, who we're hiring in operations is a much broader spectrum than it used to be. And you hear a lot about getting science backgrounds in the business, and I think that's super relevant right now.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is just adapt. I mean, as a business Politico, every couple of years we constantly reinvent ourselves, and that's basically forced on the publisher. We've been successful both in profitability and also in journalism, but you constantly have to adapt to new technologies, new markets, new people, new challenges. How we see our Europe expansion is we're not a replication. This is not. I was telling Tim that we disagree. I mean, we're not the Americans coming over. We see ourselves as a global brand, but we're really adapting to Europe rather than replicating our DC journalism to provide an American perspective on European politics. So really just, and same with my experience in Argentina, you just had to adapt to new cultures.
Okay. Got some time for some questions from the floor. To ask them around content, culture. They're both profitable. I haven't asked them how much they make in profit. Someone might want to ask that question. Some questions from the floor, please.
I have one. We actually had a tweet where this came from, but I won't identify the person. And they had asked, because I think it shows the different models, whereas Politico has stayed very, very focused. And Business Insider, even though it's called Business Insider, what this tweet said was, is it really about business? And it cited your most popular stories on the site right now, one of which is the King of Jordan sent out this badass photo in response to ISIS. And then there was actually, which did well, got 200,000 views. Then there was the follow-up, which did even better. And that was 11 photos showing King Abdullah II of Jordan being a total badass. Is there a risk? I mean, are you really a competitor of Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, with the badass photos of King Abdullah?
Well, first of all, I'd say if you have a look at the top story on the Wall Street Journal for the last few months in video, you'll probably be surprised. It's about the movie Sex Tape. So I think we're not alone in this, broadening of business. For us, what's really important is, we're trying to reach business people in a very different way to traditional journalism. So we also feel that, look, we're about business and everything that business people are interested in. So the reason that's the top story on the site is because people are interested in it, right? So we don't, and that's fine as a model. We're not trying to be the FT or the Economist. And great publications who have a very defined audience and are very good at delivering a product, as Tim said, to that audience. So we're not trying to be that. We're trying to reach a wider business audience, a bigger range in age group to that business audience, and a new generation of business users. So, and they are interested. And as you look at this concept of what used to be very simple B2B, B2C, is really merging into many things, and that's being driven again by the distribution channels. So you look at Facebook feeds for people. Do you keep a separate business Facebook feed and a consumer Facebook? Of course you don't. And Twitter and LinkedIn. These are areas that are merging the traditional boundaries of what is valid to that user, and it ultimately is being driven by the consumer. So the consumer has all the power in this new generation, and that's really the shift. So we're not. We will happily continue to create interesting content for those people.
Okay.
And just to contrast, for how we see it, it's a great day if we get like 1 million stories or 1 million page views on one story. But if going back to those 5 people, if we know that Dennis McDonough this is in DC, Dennis McDonough in the White House, or like Martin Selmayr in Brussels, or Juncker, if they're not reading that story and a broader audiences, then we failed, because we really care about the core audience. So we really just as we've grown, we've still maintained that focus on politics and policy news for insiders.
Okay. Anyone want there? Oh, we already have it.
Ori from eBaum's World. I'm wondering, what do you do with regards to audience acquisition? When you go from US to Europe, do you take a US approach where your audience acquisition team in US are doing that, or are you developing local expertise, or are you even using partners?
It's a lot local expertise, but also when we think about our audience in subscribers and audience and how we kind of look at our audience, it really is it's more of a campfire, and it's more a triangle. Our core audience is our subscribers, who are advertisers, who are our sources, and who are also our readers. So it's a really tight group. And what we've seen in terms of trends is that that DC audience has really become globally focused, and Europe has become a main arena for global policy, and it has much more of an impact now than it did 10 years ago. In terms of new audience acquisition, that's why we partnered for a reason, and we didn't just partner with Axel Springer. We had a joint acquisition of European Voice and a sister company in France. So how do you acquire those relationships and really amplify those existing networks to concentrate and develop an audience?
Anyone?
Hi, Paul Max from Dennis. I'm just wondering what your approach has been to recruitment and how you found, looking for talent in the UK and Europe compared to the States. Are you looking at, seeing experienced people from traditional publishers over here, or is it finding grassroots juniors and training them up, or a bit of both?
For us, I think it's a mix. It's a bit of both. I think I think this came up earlier in the week. How there's a huge amount of talent in traditional publishing that we shouldn't just ignore because it's in traditional publishing. It's wrong to say, well, they can't possibly adapt. So it is something different. So it's harder maybe for depending on what you've been doing in that area. But we're certainly looking at a mix, and there's a huge talent pool in the UK. I mean, you know, we located in Old Street because we're hipsters, of course. But you know, and just around there, the creative tech startup businesses that are super vibrant. There's so much going on there, and in other pockets of Europe as well, Berlin being one. So you know, there's lots of talent pools out there. It's certainly a range for us. You know, we're not just hiring millennials, and so yeah, I think it's actually a great opportunity for existing people in publishing.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, Paul, you get the last question of the event. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
So I hope you've all enjoyed the morning session today. These are 5 things we've learned. It's by no means exhaustive. I hope you've learned a lot more than this. But here are just a few ideas which sprung to mind. So boundaries are disappearing, and that's been a theme this morning. Business Insider were just talking about that. You know, it's not exactly clear who exactly you're competing with anymore. And the same goes with Charles at Forbes. He was kind of saying, you know, it's PR agencies, media agencies. You know, there's a lot of opportunity being created by these sorts of convergent forces, and I think that's a huge challenge. And an opportunity to redefine what we do, and you know, maybe it won't be called the Publishing Summit in 10 years' time. Who knows? I think that was an important lesson. Next one is that there's a battle against industry inertia going on. I think particularly that came up around the ad fraud. You know, Andrew at OpenX was talking about how they had to take a hit to try and change their business around, and there are a lot of practices which the industry has fallen into, you know, buying traffic, that sort of thing, which, you know, takes a lot of time and a lot of bravery to sort of to go against. And then the example of the FT, I think, was really interesting, where they're talking about attention-based metrics. You know, that's going to be really difficult. You know, it's not the product which is difficult to create. It's actually trying to sell that and trying to change the way agencies and the sorts of processes which have been built up. So that was a sort of one of the takeaways I had. I think it pays to mine your data. That was another key theme of the event. We've seen Connor Mullen was talking about the extensive lengths. I think he's obviously been getting into his sixth form statistics again and fishing out the old textbook to better understand first-party data. There's a very visual representation of that when he sort of showed that huge iceberg and the depth in which you can start differentiating your product offering to advertisers by really geeking out on that sort of on the data side of things. FT again, they've been mining data and trying to and doubled their conversion rates just by A/B testing, multivariate testing. You know, there's a lot more of those sorts of skill sets entering publishing businesses. I think that's fascinating. Second to last point, company culture matters most. That was something which Tim brought up from the town hall. Trying to carve out time, trying to stop the culture of back-to-back meetings and actually sort of creating some time to think, I think, is increasingly important. And that's, for all we talk about programmatic and mobile, and we get sort of caught up in these terms, I think those are some of the most the softer, more effective ways to sort of transition business. The last one is embrace the murkiness. I kind of don't really need to explain that because I think everyone in this room kind of is. And I'd love to hear more examples. We're rolling out the coverage in the UK. I'd love to keep in touch with you all and get plenty of examples of how this is happening. Those are just quick 5 things. Hope you've enjoyed the event. I'm going to hand over to Nick to see us off. But thank you.
Thank you, Chris. You made it through the last 3 days. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that we deliver on the promise of giving you new insights, great new connections, as well as a great experience that will help you change your organizations. We hope we delivered on that. I want to thank, of course, the AOP. Thank you for your support, Tim and Zoe and Tim Kane. You were huge in helping us bring this all together. The other thing I want to do is I want to thank our sponsors. We can't bring events like this to you without our sponsors, so thank you for supporting the vision, for being here. We're very grateful, as well as to all of our speakers who filled our minds with so much information and knowledge this week, so thank you. Also, the Digiday team who's worked so hard to put this event on. Also want to thank Brian Morrissey, who took us through the last 3 days. Thank you, Brian and team. Please stay tuned to Digiday every day as we'll continue to cover all the issues, the challenges and opportunities that we covered over the last few days, as well as please join us for our programmatic summit that we're going to be doing in Amsterdam in April. That's going to be a collection of brands, agencies, and publishers addressing that market. So, we'll get all points of view on that. And then we're going to rerun this event in the fall. It looks like October, so we'll make an announcement on that soon. That's all I have. Again, thank you so much for coming, and safe travels home until next time. Thank you.